Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sharing group. And we are so excited, y'all. So excited about our guest today. Today, we are highlighting lesson 67 of A Course in Miracles, which states, "Love created me like itself." Love created me like itself. And I'm going to read some of the text because this is such a powerful lesson. Some of the text says, "Today's idea is a complete and accurate statement of what you are. This is why you are the light of the world. This is why God appointed you as the world's savior. This is why the Son of God looks to you for his salvation. He is saved by what you are." We will make every effort today to reach this truth about you and to realize fully, if only for a moment, that it is the truth. And that is such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lesson, everyone. And we are joined by someone who, like us, is made of love, from love, for love. Laura McGlynn had a near-death experience and subsequently found relief from her suffering. So welcome, Laura, to the sharing group. We are so very honored you have joined us today.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. You're welcome. So you can get right started right at your NDE or wherever you would like to get started, and we'll go from there.
Okay. That was a powerful, powerful lesson.
Wasn't that
Wow.
amazing? Wasn't that amazing? And every lesson is like connected to the guest. So I just was like, when I saw that's for today, I was like, wow, a powerful lesson for a powerful woman.
Divine timing.
Divine timing, absolutely.
Two powerful women.
Yes, I'll take it.
Well, I guess to give you a little background, I had really no background in spirituality at all. And I was at a point in my life when this all occurred that I was I was feeling sick on many, many levels, but especially because I was at a point where I was accepting my own mortality. And that feeling is a really, really sick feeling. Um, when I was a kid, I had issues with childhood trauma. And so that led to typical mental problems. And so I had suicidal thoughts most of my life, but I never acted on them or, uh, did anything more than just entertain them. But at that point in my life, they had actually stopped for about 3 years. And uh, this feeling, though, was a much different feeling because the point that I was at, I didn't think that it was possible for me to exist here without like massive amounts of drugs and alcohol. And the reason for that was I was an alcoholic, but beyond that, I had 15 back surgeries between 2010 and 2020. And my spine was basically crumbling during those years. And at the time when things were the worst, I hadn't been diagnosed yet, but I had an autoimmune disease that was destroying my thyroid, and it's called Hashimoto's disease, but it can affect a lot of different parts of your body. And anyway, I would go for a walk and break my foot. Like that happened like 2 or 3 times. And, at one point it was in 2018, just about 5 years ago, both of my feet were broken at the same time. And I had to decide which one was broken worse because I wanted to go to work And I didn't want to go in a wheelchair. I couldn't go in a wheelchair, and you can't walk into walking boots. So I had to decide which one was worse. And that was at a good point in my life. So if that's a good point, then the bad points were pretty bad. But anyway, I had been on disability for a long time, and I got SSDI at the age of 38, which is kind of like unheard of with a back problem. And anyway, I I was able to get back to work eventually, but it didn't last all that long. I started a new job and COVID hit. And so I was put on furlough, and the NDE happened when I was on furlough. So furlough was like this free ticket for me to just drink and basically not leave the house. And I was prescribed Dilaudid. And so I had like accumulated like massive amounts of that. And I was taking that at not as prescribed. I'll just say that. But there was one point that I realized that the amount that I was using, it was impossible that I could be alive. But, I have a degree in biology, and I worked in protein chemistry, so I have a good understanding of how things bind in the brain. And I realized that, like, geez, this isn't it can't be binding because it's not even making me drowsy. Like, I mean, these were amounts of medication that if I had said to a doctor how much it was, they wouldn't believe me because it would be impossible. But anyway, I didn't know why it wasn't working. And it was frustrating because I was in pain. And I was also using it to get out of myself. So I wasn't getting that like release. And at the same time, I had a medical device that it is implanted in my spine, and it blocks the signal of pain going to my brain. And it had broken. And when I got it, that was the only reason I was able to get back to work, because it changed my life. And it cut down the pain so much that I could go back to living like somewhat normally. And anyway, it had started to die, and then eventually just really like went kaput. And they were supposed to last 10 years. This was like at year 2. So anyway, one day I went to the doctors, and they had finally said, okay, we'll replace it. And uh, that day, I don't know if the two things were related or not, but I was in my car, which is a Jeep, and my favorite thing is to have the doors off and the roof off and like the music blasting. And there was a song that like just hit me, and I don't know. I mean, I understand now why, but like music has always been something important to me. But this song just had an effect on me, and I ended up driving around all afternoon. I left the doctor's appointment, and I felt so good. I didn't know what was happening to me. And I thought to myself, like, I don't know what this is, but this is better than any drug I've ever had. And it turned out that it was joy. I mean, at the time I didn't know that because I hadn't felt joy, probably since I was like a kid. And anyway, I drove around, it got dark out, I went home, and there was a show on TV that I had like been binge watched before. And I had seen like seasons 3 and 4, and I never saw season 1, and I didn't know why the show was created, but it was kind of like not a reality show, but sort of. It was called 60 Days In on A&E, and it was about this prison that was overrun with crime. And anyway, they picked 6 people to go into the prison, and they didn't tell anyone like that they weren't criminals. They were just there to be the sheriff's eyes and ears. And anyway, they would pull the prisoners out and these participants out and interview them. And they just told the participants that they were filming a documentary about jails. And I was watching these people and I got instantly interested because one of the participants had this Boston accent, and I'm from Boston. So I just like zeroed in on her. But I saw myself in her behavior. And I realized pretty quickly that she had borderline personality disorder, or at least what appeared to be that. And I could see how she was creating these situations that were only in her mind. And she was making her life so miserable because of things that she was kind of projecting onto other people. And it was a unique thing because they would interview her and you'd get her side of the story. Then they'd interview everyone else and you'd get their side of the story. And I saw what actually happened. And it was like, oh my God, that's what I do. And it was like I was cured. Um, but the other thing that I noticed was that all six of these people had really kind of polarized, like good sides and bad sides. Like that's how I perceived them. And anyway, I watched this show for 12 hours straight. And I was like a binge watcher, but I usually wouldn't watch TV like that. But that night when I had gotten home was when it really set in that like I don't know what's happening with these drugs, but it's going to be the alcohol obviously that kills me because I had already been diagnosed with fibrosis, and like that was like a year and a half earlier. And I was so sick all the time that I knew I wouldn't last more than a few years like that. But anyway, I had this thought with the medication that like God's not letting me die. Like that has to be what it is. I couldn't figure anything else out. And anyway, after 12 hours of watching this show, I couldn't I had a hard time operating the remote. So I decided to shut the TV off and sleep for a little while. So I did that and I put my head down on the pillow and I just started thinking. And the first thought that I had was, wow, there were a lot of different personalities, in this show. And I was thinking about the good parts and the bad parts of all of them. And I had this realization, like I saw like a circle, and I realized that they were each part of everyone was like one of them was in me to some degree or another. And anyway, at the time, I didn't know why I was seeing like circle, but it just felt like, um, I don't know. It was just interesting to see, to have that realization. And at that point, I started, I know now I started downloading, but when that kind of thing happens to you, you don't know what it is, you know? But what would happen was I was just thinking so like quickly. And I am kind of a thinker, so I do spend a lot of time in thought, but this was like something I had never uh, experienced. And anyway, I'd think of a question and I'd get a text message. And at this point in my life, I wasn't talking with friends that often that I would hear from like even one person a day. Maybe if I heard from one person a day, that would be a lot. But in the space of an hour, I got probably like 5 text messages, and they weren't, like one word. I would think of a question, and there would be a sentence that I would get from a friend that was the exact answer to what I was asking. And the first time it happened, I didn't really think much of it. I wasn't paying attention. The second time, even still, but after like the third and fourth time, I was like, what's happening to me, And I had the air conditioner on at the same time, and I could kind of like sometimes people can hear things in white noise, and it almost sounded like there was music coming from it. Something like I could hear something in the air conditioner, and I ended up having to unplug it because it bothered me. And anyway, I decided over that winter, because this was June. So the winter beforehand, I had called this medium a few times, and I saw her back in, like, I want to say 2006 or 2007. Maybe it was, but around there. It was before 2010. I know that. And anyway, she didn't know me. I'd only seen her once, but I had called her over the winter a bunch of times, and the way she ran her business was she never answered the phone, but she would call you back and schedule a time. So you'd leave a message and she'd return your call. So anyway, I left probably, I don't, an embarrassingly high number of messages over that winter, and she'd call back and I would never take the call because I'd be sober or soberer. And I'd be afraid. I didn't want to know what she was going to say. So anyway, I had this thought laying in bed that if I call her, if something's really happening to me right now, I bet if I call her, she will answer the phone. And I don't know why I thought that, but so I was like, well, I'll try. So I called her and she answered the phone. And she said, well, I'm not going to have time to fit you in for about 2 weeks. Is that okay? And I was like, well, I kind of need to know something right now. And she said, well, you said you've seen me before. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, your voice sounds familiar. And at that point, I wasn't sure about like a medium doing it over the phone. I didn't know if that would really work. I knew that she was the real deal, but and she had explained to me that she had done that she was doing things over Zoom because of COVID. And anyway, she started to ask me or describe my nana, my grandmother. And then she said something about my mother that was correct. And so then I knew like she definitely was sensing me. And so I told her what was happening. And I told her that I was an alcoholic and that I just told her everything. And I mean, we weren't on the phone all that long, but anyway, she said to me, the very first thing that she said was, oh, honey, you don't need me. You need a psychiatrist. And she was like, and she explained, she was like, well, when alcoholics get to the other side, they have a lot of different work that they have to do. And uh, because of different problems that they've had in their lives. And anyway, I said to her, I was like, I know you're not going to tell me either because you don't have the information or because it's like morally wrong. But what is happening to me right now? And all she would say was that what was happening sounded like usually it doesn't happen to people until much later in life. And I'm not sure if it was what she said or how she said it, but I didn't want to ask anything else. Like, and I just kind of ended the conversation, and that was that. But at the same time, I had this thought that I had never tried doing any kind of rehab, and like I had gone to detoxes for alcohol, but they were just 2 or 3 day little quick spin dry type things, and never done any kind of long-term rehab or nothing for opiates. So I decided at that point that I should probably try to go somewhere for, a month or 3 months or whatever. So what I needed to do was call my cat sitter because I have 3 cats, and I called her, and uh, she 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 just I told her what was happening, and she believed me, but she was like, Laura, are you writing this down? And I said, I can't write. Like I can't think. My mind is so busy, I wouldn't be able to concentrate to write. And I said, I think if God wants me to remember, I will. And I had known her for a long time. So anyway, she said that yes, she would help me in any way that she could. She was actually a friend from AA. But so anyway, she was the only person that I was like humble enough to allow in to see my condo. It was such a pigsty because I'd been so sick, and I mean, it kind of looked like a hoarder lived there. So I was mortified and I didn't want just anyone coming in. But So she said she'd help me. And then I had a second phone call to make, and I knew I had to make it. So not making this call was not an option, but it was a really strange phone call. Like I had to call my friend Joyce and tell her that I hadn't been sober in a long time, and also that God was really happy with her and so grateful for all the work that she does, because she runs a shelter for cats, and she spends probably like 75% of her free time working at the shelter and fostering kittens and doing rescues and boarding situations and all these things. Like, anyway, I met her because I have two kittens that she fostered, and they were handicapped. And anyway, we got to be friends really quickly. And I got on the phone with her, and I looked outside my window, and I'll send you this picture. But when when I looked out, there was this big cloud, and I look out on like 20 miles of ocean. And when we get a thunderstorm, they usually like blow through. They can come through really quickly sometimes, but like east to west. And I noticed that there was this one cloud sitting right in front, like above me. I could see the sun on all sides of it. So I could look over to the left, and, like a quarter mile down the road, there was sun. I could see the sun on the opposite side of it, like further out into the ocean, and I could also see it to the right. It was literally like a cloud that was like a quarter of a mile long that was right over me. And the picture of it is even more dramatic than I remember it being. But I said to Joyce, I said, "Oh, it's weird. I didn't know we were going to get a thunderstorm today." So anyway, I didn't really think anything of it. And I started telling her, I said, "Well, I haven't been sober for a long time." And when I said that, a lightning bolt came down from the cloud. And, and that was when I took the picture. And I said to her, you won't believe this, but I guess, with everything else that's happening today, like what else could happen? And I just thought it was kind of funny. And so I went and, started to tell her the second thing, which was a little bit more difficult to explain because, here it is. Like, I was never like very spiritual, and she's actually an associate minister at her church. So I had to tell her that, God had a message for her, that God had shown me this little group of kittens, a litter of kittens, and said, "Thank you for taking care of his most precious creatures." And anyway, when I said that to her, another lightning bolt came down. And anyway, about 25 minutes later, we ended the call. And I took a picture at that point too, because it was bright and sunny. The cloud, I don't know when the cloud disappeared, but there was never any rain or thunder or wind, just the two lightning bolts when I said, the two things that I needed to tell her. And the rest of the day, I don't really I don't remember what I did that day. Like it wasn't, I spoke to her maybe at like 3 or 4 o'clock. So there wasn't too much time left in the day, but I went to bed that night and sober for the first time in God knows how long. Because another thing that I forgot to mention, when all this was happening, I went around my house and I dumped all the opiate that I had. I just got rid of it because I thought to myself, like, I don't know when this feeling is going to end. And I want to be rid of all of it. So it forces me, you know, to do something. And anyway, I went to bed that night and I started feeling this, like the best way I can describe it is like this inner whirling. And now I understand that it was chakras moving, but at the time I didn't have any words for it. I had no idea what it was, and it was strong. It was terrifying because of everything that had happened that day and what the medium had said. Uh, and I just had this thought, like, I'm not going to get to say goodbye to anyone.
Wow.
And at that moment, my cat came up and he bit the Miraculous Medal. that I was wearing. And there's a whole story behind my wearing it. And it actually involved the medium that I spoke to that day. When I had seen her years before, she had knocked my socks off with, telling me about people on the other side, relatives. And then when she was done, she asked me if I had any questions. And I said, well, yeah, is my Nana here? Because her death was the hardest of any death that I've been through. And I was only 6 when she died. But anyway, she said, oh, yeah, she's definitely here. And she said it so quickly that the thought went through my mind like, oh, that's BS. She's just saying that. And as soon as that thought went through my mind, she said the word Janet, and Janet is my mother's name. Janet is also my Nana's mother's name. And so when she said that, it was like, whoa, like, okay, I'm listening. And she said, she started describing this necklace that I didn't have on. And my mother had given me a cross with this little tiny medal that was pinned on her the day she was born. And when she gave it to me, we didn't know it was a miraculous medal. And even when the medium was describing it, I didn't know it was a miraculous medal. But she described the necklace, and I knew exactly what she was talking about. And I had been afraid to wear it because the metal was so thin that I was terrified I'd lose it. And it meant a lot to my mother. It meant a lot to me because it was my Nana's, basically. And anyway, what she came through and said was that I didn't have to always wear it, but always have it with me, like always have that medal with me. And so anyway, my cat came up on the bed that day and bit the medal. And right then I knew my Nana was with me. And so I held on to the medal, and I do not know what made me do this. The only guess that I have is like the soul just knows things. The soul knows things that we don't understand. And so I just had the idea to meditate. And the woman who taught me how to meditate would always say that, because I'm sorry, I wasn't a big meditator. And so I had one person who helped me learn how to do it, or like what to do. And she said that if you can't think of a word, repeat a word. If you can't think of a word, my word is love. So just use that word. So I'm sitting there in bed, and I thought, okay, I'll breathe in and say the word love, and breathe out and say the word Nana, and I'll just get through this, because I didn't know what was happening, but it was terrifying. It was definitely by far the most frightening thing that's ever happened to me. And like I've rolled over in the car on the highway, and like even really bad car accidents were not like this. And anyway, within like 4 cycles of doing that, I was out of my body, and I saw my Nana, and I like instantly started to cry. It was weird because I was out of my body, but I could feel my body crying. And I said to her, I missed you so much. And I felt the weight of the grief that I carried in missing her literally fall off of me like bricks. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that I heard was, your suffering is over. You've learned the lessons you needed to learn. Going forward, you will experience pain differently. And it wasn't her that was saying it. Like when I heard that, I wasn't looking at her. And anyway, it's hard to describe or to tell the story in time, because on the other side, there is no time. So it was like in an instant, I experienced gnosis, and I knew everything. But when you know everything, like you don't remember what it is that you know unless you ask a question, really. I mean, that's kind of how I've like figured it out since. And my one of my biggest ones was, well, why would you pick me? Like I felt like I had wasted my life. I had had success in different things. Like my very first goal was that I would be a Division I basketball player, and I had teachers laughing at me, like, and telling me I was wasting my time. And I did that. And I was able to, uh, be successful in work. But love had always eluded me, because I had borderline personality, and I wasn't like the typical person who has like a long history of like terrible failed relationships. I got into one relationship that was really, really difficult. And I just decided I would never do that again. It was so painful that I can't do it. So I just isolated myself. And that probably added to, my alcoholism, obviously. Um, but I just felt like I was a waste, and I had hated myself on every level, since the age of 7, when things happened in my life that changed me. Um, anyway, I didn't I didn't understand how God sees us. And when I asked, why would you pick me? The answer was, this happens for everyone. It's just your time. And what that meant was that everyone, when they're in their soul's last lifetime on earth, gets the information I was getting. I don't know. I don't necessarily think it means that everyone has an NDE, but everyone learns what I was learning. And so there's so many different things that happen that uh, it's hard to put them all together like in one moment. But um, there were a lot of things that I asked. Obviously, they asked me if I wanted to go back, and my answer was literally, hell no, there is nothing of that world that interests me in any way. and and like there was no way. I mean, after I felt, because I was in this broken body that I had lived in chronic pain for 25 years, and the last 10 years of it were like chronically acute pain, because there's back problems are not fun, but there are things that can happen that make like a herniated disc feel like a hangnail, and so there was no way I was coming back, I was in ecstasy. And anyway, they showed me what would be possible, what could be possible if I decided to go back. And they also showed me parents, and I saw my parents on this court, and like they're here and they're healthy, um and I was like, I can't leave. Like, after I just found all this out, I can't leave them behind and not tell them this. So I decided to that I would go back. And they showed me this being that could go back and forth from heaven to earth. And that really had me perplexed. And I was like, well, that's an angel. Why are you showing me that? And because I couldn't see this being's face, but I could see their smile almost from behind. And when they were on earth, they were just so joyful. They had this joy that I hadn't ever felt before. And I didn't know, like, why would someone who is in heaven leave heaven to go to earth? Like, why in the world? And the answer was that, like, they leave for the joy of it, because they find it so, like, so fun and such a happy experience that like they'll go back and forth, and it's basically the same. And I could not understand that. But when they were on earth, they were in this like wide open, I saw this wide, expansive area that looked kind of like Arches National Park in Utah, or like Grand Canyon, that kind of topography. And they were in a car that had no roof. I could see, I was looking down on them, and I could see the music trailing behind the car, which is a weird thing to say. It's like, can you smell the number 11? Like, but I could see the music. And anyway, there, the last little bit of being in heaven, I was floating on this giant body of water, and I was with my Nana, and I just said to her, I was like, I just remember this feeling of excitement, like a few minutes earlier before that, I was saying, my human condition, my human condition. This is going to be so hard in my human condition, because they explained to me like what I would do. And anyway, I remember that part very clearly, but I remember my excitement more. Like that feeling was greater. And I said to my Nana, there's so much that I need to know. And she said, well, you'll get it in bits and pieces as you go. And the main thing, there was only one thing that they asked me to remember, and they probably explained it more than once, but it was that Jesus didn't come here for the reasons that I was taught in church, and that Jesus came here to show us what we are capable of. And anyway, it was explained to me why my life was going to be similar to Jesus's. And I didn't want to say that, like, when I came back, because I didn't know how to explain it. And I couldn't, like, I hadn't unwrapped it yet, like with perception. But what they meant was that, like, I kind of went to the end of the game, and I learned, like, oh, okay, we don't die. So I figured it out. We don't die. So anyone who wants like what I have, like they don't have to go to the end of the game. Like they don't have to have a socially reviled mental illness and 16 back surgeries, to get the same result, which is to be able to live heaven on earth. If they will just accept that, like, the message, like, is real. You are a powerful creator. And anyway, I woke up the next day and I was back in my body, but things did not feel the same. Like I felt like I was in this world almost like in a bubble, and it was just me and God. And the world was still going on, but it almost felt like, like a Wonder Woman is invisible. It almost felt like I could be invisible. And anyway, I had planned that day to go down to my parents' boat, and they keep it about an hour away. And I hadn't been down there for years. I mean, I hadn't been on their boat for years, and I'd only been down there once. And when I drove down there, I got lost, even with the GPS. But that day I drove down there and didn't need the GPS, and I knew I wouldn't need the GPS. And at one point I stopped in a convenience store, and I just tell this story because this part of the story, because it's funny to remember how much love I felt. And, there was a kid working at the store, and I just felt such incredible love for him. And I thought to myself, like, either he's gonna like see that like there's something really wrong with me, or he's gonna, like, he could come out of character and just like we'll laugh, because it's all a joke. But anyway, I was able to like rein in my love for him and behave normally and leave the store. But it was weird for me, because like, how could I love a stranger? But I did. And I got down to where they keep their boat, and it's on Cape Cod, and there's a lot of really nice boats there. And I was looking around, and the funny thing about watching that jail show, the show about the jail, was that it ended up being like a parable for me, because everything, like when these participants went into the jail, they had to go through a training, like basically on how to survive in that world, because the world on the other side, in the jail is very different than the outside, and like you'll get killed if you don't know how to behave. Things like you don't want, they told these people that you don't want the inmates to know that you're educated, and you don't want them to know you have any money, or like, anyway, they went through this very specific set of guidelines. And because they don't have money in a jail, food and things that are really unimportant to us on the outside become their currency. So like one of the first episodes of this show, people basically started killing each other over tater tots. And anyway, everything was about what they could get in the commissary. So to go back to being on the Cape and in this harbor, I was looking around at the boats and just the beautiful landscape. And I thought to myself, oh my God, these boats, like all these beautiful things, it's just commissary. Like this is all commissary in a prison. Like compared to what's next. Like the best things of this life are nothing more than like a box of ramen noodles, you know? And so that realization was kind of big for me. But I went out to the boat with my parents, and when I was in heaven, I had said to my Nana a bunch of times, I knew I was going to be doing that. And I said, I'm going to see Mom tomorrow. Like, will you please give me something that I can say to her so that she knows that I talked to you? Please, I said it over and over, something that I wouldn't know, that I couldn't know. And anyway, when I pulled up to the boat, the very first thing that my mother said, she had her miraculous medal in her hand. And she said, Laura, this necklace that you gave me for the medal, it's kinked. Do you think it's okay to still wear it? And I was like, oh, Nana, like the message was just for me, like she heard me, but it wasn't time to explain that to my mother. But we headed out for a ride, and I heard my mother like saying things to my father, like, David, look out, you're gonna run out of the channel, there's rocks there. And I'm listening to her like what I perceive as like paranoia, and I'm like, well, that's where I get it from. And when anyway, we came back into the harbor, and I saw her come down the ladder from the fly bridge, and it was like I saw her angels around her, and I saw how she was enveloped in love, and any kind of resentment that I had towards my parents, like, was gone, like just completely washed away. And I had this feeling of, wow, like they were the two perfect people to teach my soul what it came here to learn. Like they were perfect. Like that's why they're my parents. And anyway, we sat on the deck and the boat, and my mother looked up at the sun and she said, Laura, can you see that there's a ring around the sun? And I looked up, and there was a visible ring around the sun that I had never seen anything like that before. And you could see it without burning your eyes. and I didn't say it, but I was thinking like, oh yeah, well that's just God. Of course he's sending me a sign. Like, but anyway, uh we had a nice day out on the boat, and I came back home, and I hadn't eaten, and I didn't realize it because I wasn't thinking about that. And my stomach started to hurt, and I had this thought like, why is my stomach hurting? And I heard this voice say, your stomach hurts because you're hungry, eat something. And anyway, I had no pain. I woke up that day, and the pain that I had lived with was gone. And I didn't understand why. I thought it was because, well, I'm doing what God wants me to do. As long as I do what God wants me to do, I won't have pain. And And so I thought, well, this is wonderful. And then the thought came in though, like, well, that worked out today because I knew what I needed to do. But what am I going to do when I don't know what God wants me to do? And fear started coming in. And as the fear came in, like over like a day or two, my back just started to hurt again and everything set back in. But I didn't forget, that happened. And over the next few months, uh, I kept getting the thought of A Course in Miracles. And I bought it years before and I started to read it and I thought it was great. Like I thought it was so great that when I started to read it, I put on a post on Facebook about it. And no human being had ever told me about it, but I found it because I had read a review of a different book, and the review said, "Not since A Course in Miracles have I ever heard of, whatever." And uh, I thought, well, what's A Course in Miracles? And anyway, I put it away and I didn't think about it for years, but it kept on coming into my thoughts. And then one day I opened up this night table drawer that I never opened, and there it was. And I do not remember leaving it there. It was in with my Bible. And anyway, I put it on my coffee table where it stayed for like 3 weeks. And I had this aversion to it. And I didn't know why, but it was like, oh, I knew I needed to read it. Uh, and I opened it up. And I should say, before I go further, I I was kind of like washed clean. Like that's the only way I can describe it of the mental illness. And it was explained to me on the other side how it developed and that I was basically blessed to have been given it. And the souls around me told me how lucky I was that I got it. And I was like, I thought that was kind of crazy. But again, like the whole parable with the jail, was explained to me that when you put certain gifts in duality, they can kind of like backfire, or not backfire, but until you know how to use them, um, they'll create problems. And so I was given this black and white thinking. And God told me it was because so I would believe deeply very quickly. And that works, or it works well when you're talking about what's true and what's not true. But there's a lot of things in this world that are gray. So black and white thinking is not useful for those things. So I had to learn how to use it. But one of my biggest concerns was that like this type of judgmental thinking had been eliminated from me, but I knew I would just go back to it if I didn't find a new way of thinking. I was like a 43-year-old infant. And in some regards, that was really cool because I had this joy back that I had lost when I was 7. But I had to find a new way of organizing my thoughts, of perception. Mm-hmm. And when I started reading the course, actually, I opened the book up and I saw the introduction, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be my manual. Mm-hmm. And the only thought that I had with it was, I just need to find a new way of thinking. That was the only expectation I had from reading it. And anyway, I, within probably, started reading it in October, and by March, all the pain had disappeared, and it happened over a weekend. And in the middle of that time, an old surgical bone infection had reactivated, and I ended up spending most of December in the hospital, and I had my 16th back surgery as an emergency. I had all this hardware in my spine, and due to the infection, they had to remove the hardware. And the funny thing was it was an awful experience because, it was during a spike in COVID, and it was just for so many reasons. It was one of the worst surgical experiences I've ever had. But I kept going back to the thought, well, God said my suffering is over. So I just knew. I knew if I was suffering, I was choosing suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had this knowing that at some point I'll be really happy that this is happening. There has to be a reason why my hardware is coming out. And anyway, the infection created a lot of pain that like this medical device didn't cover. And at the end of February, I'm reading in the course that all diseases of the mind and, that I'm creating it. And I wanted to take that book and chuck it across the room, like I was envisioning it like falling apart as it hit the wall. I was so angry. Like, how could I be creating this? It's an infection. And anyway, it was funny because like I talk about the course, and it's not just reading the course, it's all these other things that happen in your life when you're reading it at the right time. And I had been told to go to a spiritual advisor by a few different people. And around that same time, I had my first appointment with this person that I ended up seeing. And she told me to start a gratitude box. So every morning, I would get up and I'd write down like 4 or 5 or 6 things I was grateful for, and I'd put it in the box. And within 3 weeks, my thinking just flip-flopped. And I started having these thoughts of gratitude that were just automatic, which was really weird. But that started at the same time that, like, I'll never forget the date. It was March 6th, 2021. Um, I've been reading the course, and I didn't understand how I could be creating the pain. So at different times I put the book down because I just didn't understand it. And I knew that that was what I needed to do, just give myself a break. And there was one day that I put on Amazon, and there was that documentary that they had, Heal. And at the end of it, there was a woman who had an autoimmune disease, and she was working with this divine conduit. And she said, well, I don't know who I am without being sick. And it was like, I started to cry. And I was like, oh my God, pain has become my entire identity because it had ruled my life for so long. There was nothing left. And at that moment, I realized I was holding on to it. And that happened on the 6th. On the 7th, I woke up and I had no pain. And it was like, wow, it was amazing. I remember what I did that day. I felt like I had this experience. I felt like Jesus walked me, like held my hand and walked me into the door of heaven. And all of a sudden, like this just space opened up in me. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much for me to learn. And um anyway, that was the beginning of the gifts that I started to receive from the course. And I started reading it again last fall, and I hit this uh place in it where it says that the biggest miracle will happen first, and like your body will heal. And I read that the first time and I didn't even see it. But anyway, I'm still experiencing like major shifts from this book. It's just incredible.
Thank you so much, Laura. What a very, very, very layered experience. Thank you for sharing. So first of all, you never had to go to rehab, right? For the opioid.
No, I did go. And actually, that was one of my experiences, was basically spelled out for me in the course, which was it was amazing. And I I met someone who is a channeler, and I started to work with her. And the reason I started to work with her was because in one conversation with her, I hadn't felt the love. Like when you go to the other side, it's a feeling that you can't experience here. It's so overwhelming and like powerful that I don't like to use the word love because it's not what we consider love, but we just don't have another word. Um, when I spoke with this woman, I felt that from her, and I knew immediately that she was like the real deal. And one of the things that she told me, and this was the summer after my NDE. One of the things she told me was, or like her guidance, her angels said, was I had been looking for a place to go because I had been struggling not with the alcohol, but with the opiates. And I was able to put down the alcohol pretty quickly, but I would go like a few weeks, and that was another thing that was strange was after the NDE, I stopped having withdrawal from opiates, which is like I don't know how that worked. Um, yeah, I really don't. I went to a rehab and didn't need medication. Like I told them that I probably wouldn't, but they didn't believe me until they saw it. Um, but anyway, I ended up going to a place that like I talked to her about it, and I was looking for a place that had more than what I could find here on the East Coast, because it seemed like out west, like in California, their mental health care had more, like was more holistic. And I had this thing that in my head about sound therapy. I really, really, really wanted to do sound therapy. And anyway, the angels told me to stop looking, that there was a place that was that like already there and it would come to me. So I never did a search for Hawaii. And there was one day where we had had a storm and the power was out, and I couldn't get my internet to work. And where I live, there's not really a good cell phone signal. So I have to have internet for my phone to work. Anyway, this place in Hawaii popped up, and I thought, oh, there's no way my insurance will cover that. But I just thought about what my friend said, and I was like, well, I'll just call and see. And lo and behold, it was covered. And anyway, the course, like when I say like miracles happen, the person who showed up to this place after me said she spent $20,000 to walk in the door.
Oh my God.
And it was an outpatient place and you had to be sober to go. I really wanted to find a place that would deal with like my issues with trauma.
Mm.
And anyway, so it was outpatient and insurance wouldn't cover uh, living there, but we lived there. It looked like a resort. It was beautiful, but they charged room and board. Uh, and for me, they waived it. And I don't know why. I didn't ask. I didn't tell anyone there that I was there and not paying anything because everyone else was there paying like
Right, right.
$4,000 a week.
Wow.
I don't know how that worked out, but again, it was the course. I mean, it told me, it says that the Holy Spirit, all you have to do is worry about your small part, and the Holy Spirit will go before you and clear the way. And that is what happened.
I've heard you talk about it, and I don't know if you said it today, but that uh the borderline personality thing that you had, because you no longer have, we're not going to speak that in the universe, but that can also be used as a tool. And I feel like, I don't know if I'm right, I feel like because of how you think, like you're processing everything that you read from the course, like you said, black and white, like you don't see like any gray areas, right? It's either you believe it or you don't. And I think
Mm.
because you incorporate it so easily into your thought process, that it is a powerful tool. Or am I?
Well, I think there were a few things that helped me
Mhm.
with understanding it. And there were like two or three things that I know came from my guides. I'm not clairaudient now. I was for a couple days when my vibration was high enough. But uh, I know that it was kind of pushed on me that I couldn't read it in a group because I
Mhm.
couldn't read it on a schedule. And I
Mhm.
knew I had to put it down when I didn't understand it.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and those two things I think were super, super important because at different times, um, I was shown in my life like what the course was talking about. And to experience the healing that I experienced as quickly as it happened, uh, it was like, wow, this is real. You know,
Love it.
it says it in the course that you have to believe, like we don't believe in what we can't see, and we only believe in what we create, you know.
Mm.
So if we can't see it and we didn't create it, like we don't believe it, like until you experience something that changes you and makes you understand that the most important eye is not your two physical ones, you know. When
Mhm.
that eye opens, then you have vision.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
Seeing and having vision are two different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna go through some really quick things that I just remember from your story, that I wanted to highlight. I love how you understood the analogy of, like, the boat and the scenery as like commissary, how this is an illusion, and it's commissary compared to the reality of
Mhm.
who we really are in heaven, and the love, and you were talking about just this love that you don't even want to call it love because the word belittles the experience. And it makes me think about the Course in Miracles, when it talks about there is no parallel to
Mhm.
God's love.
Mhm.
We can't understand it because we don't experience it here in
Mhm.
this realm. I also thought about when you said that your parents, which I thought is so significant, your parents were the two best people to give you the experiences that your soul wanted to have. And I wanted to ask, do you think that we choose our parents?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. Some people can't imagine that they like, I can't imagine I chose my parents, but no, I love that you said that because it's so true. And
Hmm.
again, it turns that perception that life is happening to us and changes it so that we can continue to recognize ourselves as, what, I've orchestrated this whole thing. This is,
Yes.
I've chosen this. There's something here for me that I want to experience. Uh, and once you change your perception, you change your life. Once you change your thought process, you change your life. So I love that you
Right. Well,
that forgiveness.
yeah, I mean, I think it's it's powerful because I created such a mess. Like I saw what hating myself did to my physical body.
Yeah.
And for me to say, like, I created that, like the borderline personality, the depression, I created that. you know, like, yes, there were things. The only thing that I didn't create was, and I mean, I don't even know, the traumatic experiences that I had, those weren't, I mean, I was 7, so
Yeah.
those weren't in my control.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the gift that gave me the experience. So it was a gift. So
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about forgiveness is the first layer, but at some point you understand it's not, forgiveness isn't necessary. Like, because it's a gift. Everything is a gift.
Yes, 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 yes.
It's hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
understand that,
Mm-hmm.
but once you do understand it, the freedom that comes from that understanding,
Mm-hmm.
that I created a mess, yes, but now I can create anything I want, and it's like when you get the centers of your being, so spiritually we all vibrate at the same level, but we have 3 other centers, our physical body, our emotions, and our thoughts, and those 3 centers vibrate at different levels. But when you get those 3 centers to vibrate at the level of your spirit, like, the laws of physics change.
Mm-hmm.
And before this time, when, like, of ascension, people would have to, meditate for a lifetime to get to, uh, a space where that kind of living was possible. But now we are in a time where we are seeing people reach enlightenment. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, how exciting is that?
That,
Like, it took me a while for the understanding to set in that we aren't here to just spend like 70.5 years, with X amount of time working, saving money so that you can retire comfortably and then die. Like, there's more to it. Like, like, we're not here to amass wealth and leave it behind. Everything that is here, that is real, that is important, that we're here for, we take with us.
mm,
It's eternal.
mm, mm. I love that. It makes me think about Dolores Cannon, who did the QHHC, the hypnotherapy.
Mm.
She said she would view a lot of, when she would hypnotize people, they would have what she called meat and potatoes lifetime. And that's what you're talking about, where you just, the woman is in the kitchen, she's cooking for the kids, her husband is working. It's just like, then they,
Yes.
they raise the kids and they die. You're absolutely right. This is so much more than that. And I've heard that this time is called, this particular incarnation is the end of a spiritual season for a lot. It's almost like graduation. So you are
Well,
right. Yeah.
that's what when I went to the other side, that's what I experienced. It was like a graduation, and I couldn't understand it because I had lived this like waste of a life. I mean, that's what I had thought. I didn't understand that there was a purpose to every part of my life, and what God meant with you've learned the lessons you've needed to learn. It didn't mean that I was done learning. It meant I was done learning unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I learned what I was supposed to learn unconsciously. Now I can learn in joy.
I love that. I love that. Joy is such a thing of your experience, and I love it because it really is the juice that keeps us.
I love that, the juice.
I love that word, girl. I love that. It's really what keeps us here. Why else will we be here? And that goes into creativity or whatever. That's like the compass. What gives you joy? I always tell people, do that which gives you joy. It will lead you home. It would
Mhm.
lead you to that amazing feeling of surrender and love and joy. And so I love that joy is such a part of your experience. Explain what I've heard you say, and you just talked about a little bit of it, is how it's meaningless to hold a grudge. Holding a grudge is meaningless. How is that a waste of our time?
Well, I mean, there's purpose to it initially, but it's a waste of time because it only pollutes your mind. So what I see in Loretta, Laura's perception of Loretta is Laura in Loretta. Like, so everything that I see about you is me. So anything that I have a problem with anyone, it's all about me.
Right.
That was another thing that I heard clairaudiently and I didn't understand. Like that very first day I heard everything is for you. It's all for you. And I thought, what? Do you want me to go crazy? And I didn't understand. I knew I didn't understand that, but that's what it is. Like we are really one.
Mm-hmm.
We're not separate. There's no private thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so holding a grudge against someone, we don't even begin to understand the effects that it has on us at a cellular level and
Mm-hmm.
physically,
Wow.
but energetically, it prevents me from being in heaven. I walk myself out of heaven the moment I have a negative thought about someone else, and it's always about me.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Forgiveness it's like me forgiving someone else for my thought. Like I'm
Mm,
forgiving you for my thought,
mm,
you know?
yeah, yeah. Love it. I love it. So how would you like to be contacted? I know people are gonna want to talk to you. Are you open to being contacted? And if so, what's your preferred method?
Probably the easiest way is Facebook.
Okay.
I have my email address. I get so much spam there that I would probably miss, you know, but
Mhm.
I can give you that. I've had people send me emails, which it's just my name,
Mhm.
Laura McGlynn, LauraMcGlynn 646 at Comcast.net.
Okay.
But it would be a better bet to send me a message on Facebook.
Facebook. And your
Yeah.
Facebook is your full name, Laura McGlynn.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, Laura, any last words of wisdom for the viewers before we close out?
Well, I think you mentioning forgiveness is a big one. And that's part of course, but our only function is forgiveness. I mean, that's what the course says, you know. A lot of people are talking right now about, right, I see people asking questions and saying that they never want to come back to earth, like they don't want to reincarnate. Uh and I went through that. I was told it's my last time here, but by the time I'm already seeing, and I understand the gift that it is to be here. And when you are at an understanding of like complete forgiveness, like this is heaven on earth. Like it's only within our reach. No one else can do it for you.
Mhm.
No one else has any part in it.
Mhm.
Like my peace is determined by me and me only. No one can take it from me,
Mhm.
you know? Unconditional love
Mhm.
is the most amazing gift we can give anyone else. But it's not that easy to understand. We're so conditioned, you know? But that's why the course is such a miracle.
Well, I was going to say, and really the healing is the healing of ourselves, loving ourselves first, and then able to extend that love outward. Yeah.
Well, that's the most important thing that I've learned is that there's only one opinion that matters. It's mine.
Yeah.
If I can love myself and be true to who I am, which is love, like we are all love, whether we believe it or not, like we're here to embody love. And it's such a hard thing to do. But in the process of doing it, we set ourselves free.
We set ourselves free. And I love that. I love it. I love it all. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been
Thank you for having me.
Complete pleasure. I'm gonna read you your closing remarks, Laura. Laura, our experience on this planet requires us to stuff ourselves into these small bodies and cover up our divinity with layers of amnesia and the illusion of separation. In addition to that, we must contend with the mind, which, as you know, can lead us to all kinds of suffering. We go through great strains to forget who we are in order to have a rich experience here in this dimension. And in spite of all our efforts, our light still shines through. And this is most certainly the case with you, Laura. Your light pierces right through all of the challenges that you, as a courageous soul, decided to have in this incarnation. As today's lesson states, love created you like itself. You have been created by love, and the essence of that which you are will never cease to exist. Thank you so much for giving us your time, your energy, your love, your laugh, which I love. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And as you and I talked about, I would love to have you join us again and maybe have a deeper conversation, as if we can go any deeper, about Course in Miracles and just all the good stuff that we've been encountering.
Well, that was beautiful. Thank you. And I would love to come back and talk again for sure. I really enjoyed it.
Yes. So
your energy is just incredible.
Oh, thank you.
So high.
Thank you. Well, speaking of joy, this gives me joy. That's why I do it. It gives joy. I get to meet the coolest sons and daughters of God. I really do. So thank you. That means a lot. And Laura, because I'm corny, we end with the heart.
Oh. Yes. I never do. Am I doing it backwards?
It's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining and stopping by. I hope that you enjoyed this session as much as I did. I really do. Please leave comments if you feel inclined. Like, subscribe, share. And thank you for joining. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Love you. Bye-bye.